Alrighty, let's see what we've got going for today. Hercule Poirot, blah blah, murder on a train, yada yada. Guys, I don't mean to embarrass you, but we did this one already. This is Murder on the Orient Express. Remember, it was one of the first reviews that I shot like a year or so ago, and what do you mean the remake? Wait, you don't mean the one with Alfred Molina in it, do you? Okay. Kenneth Branagh. Huh. Alright, Mr. Branagh, let's see what you got. Besides the mustache, of course.
From the old movies of 30 years ago and beyond,
to the world of the new films of the last 30 years.
To the movies that are now playing, this is Old, New, and Now Playing. And now, here's your host, Will Robinson Smith.
Hello and welcome to Old, New, and Now Playing, your time machine through the world of movies. I'm your host, Will Robinson Smith. Thank you so much for joining me today. And yes, we're finally going to be talking about one of the movies that I first reviewed. This is the remake, so let's not stall like we're stuck in a snowbank. Let's get this train a-rolling. This is your feature presentation. So Murder on the Orient Express is based on the 1934 Agatha Christie novel detailing the mysteries explored by one of her most famous protagonists, Hercule Poirot. There have been a few different adaptations of this story, but this is the second major motion picture. The first came out in 1974 and was directed by Sidney Lumet and starred Albert Finney, Lauren Bacall, and Sean Connery, just to name a few. I'll try to keep this review mostly about the 2017 version, but there will be some references back to the 1974 film, and if you want to see more of my thoughts exclusively on that one, you can check out my review that I did about a year or so ago by clicking on that box right there, or by going to the old tab on the main page of my channel. So like with the first film, this new adaptation features a who's who of the era. Sir Kenneth Branagh takes center stage as Poirot, as well as sitting in the director's chair. The cast also includes Oscar winners Dame Judi Dench and Penelope Cruz, as well as 4 Oscar nominees, Willem Dafoe, Michelle Pfeiffer, Johnny Depp, and Branagh, of course. Plus there's Tony Award winner Leslie Odom Jr., Tony-nominated Josh Gad, and rising star in the latest Star Wars trilogy, Daisy Ridley. The bulk of the movie takes place on the Orient Express on a 3-day journey to London. While on board, Edward Ratchett, played by Depp, is murdered in the dead of night, shortly before the train gets caught in an avalanche. Fortunately, one of the passengers happens to be Branagh's Poirot, who touts himself as
probably the greatest detective in the world.
Yeah. Anyway, like in the 74 version, Poirot is up against time to solve the mystery before the train is cleared and the murderer has a chance to escape, or the police arrest the wrong person. The film seems to be a bit of a mixed bag for some critics. It currently holds a 58% on Rotten Tomatoes, and I can kind of understand why it's not ringing true for some of those folks. The 70s film not only assembled an all-star cast of actors to fill the many roles, but it also feel like they really got to immerse themselves in the world, and director Sidney Lumet got some really wonderful performances out of them. And while I thought everyone was well cast and did fine in their roles in this modern retelling, there wasn't anything wonderfully exceptional in their performances. For example, in Lumet's film, when Ingrid Bergman's character Greta Olsen is being interviewed by Poirot, it's a wonderfully pointed moment in the story in which the camera stays on her face the entire time. It forces you in the moment with Poirot and helps suck you into her story that she's weaving. In this new movie, the character is changed to Pilar Estravados, played by Penelope Cruz, which, quick trivia point, is actually the name of a character in another Agatha Christie novel called Hercule Poirot's Christmas, but I digress. Anyway, I didn't think that Cruz did a bad job, but the way her character was used, it didn't have the same emotional resonance that I felt Bergman's performance did. And that just comes down to, I think, a combination of directing and writing. The other character that I feel like we really have to talk about with some depth is Poirot, of course. He's obviously the main character, and a lot hinges on how he's perceived. And depending on how much you like to explore Agatha Christie adaptations, between film and television there are now 12 different actors who have taken on the role. Honestly, I thought for the most part, Branagh did a fine job, and if this is your first time seeing any version of this story, you might not have any issues with it. He's thoughtful in the character, and he's believable in his deductions. However, because we do have another feature film to compare with, it's hard to set that aside, at least for me. The character of Poirot is a very particular man. He's a man of mannerisms, if you will. The fact that he does certain things with regularity and clockwork repetition not only inform who he is, but also allows him to do what he does so well. And that's part of what I think led to Albert Finney's Academy Award nomination for the role. As an actor, he made very distinct choices for certain movements and decisions that he allows Poirot to make. It made him feel like he's lived with that character for a longer period of time. On the flip side, Branagh didn't seem to have any of those constant movements or choices, and having known what the performance could be, I found it somewhat lacking. A big example for me, and this really isn't a plot detail, so it's not really a spoiler.
Minor spoilers!
Thank you. Anyway, it's the sleep mask, essentially, that Poirot wears. So in the 1974 film, he has this little mesh mask that he pulls over his mustache to keep it in place when he goes to sleep, and every time you see him in his sleeping compartment, he's always wearing that. Well, in this new rendition, they do a slight twist on that. He has like a physical mask that covers his mustache, which he has in the first time you see him and the first night, but then the second night, when he's restless, the actual night of the murder, he doesn't really have that, and it's a small thing, I know, but it's those little details that really make him who he is, and so by not having that, it kind of pulled away from the character and the fact that he's not paying attention to what should be, for him, a really important detail. All that said, there were a number of things that I thought the film did really well and were a nice update to the original. The marketplace we see early on in the film, for example, feels more fleshed out and authentic as opposed to the first film, which didn't come off as equally real. Although I partly chalk that up to when the movie was made. And while in the actual 1930s when the movie takes place, there may not have been the same type of racial diversity in the first-class car of the Orient Express, it was nice to see a nice mix of actors, and they found a nice way to work that into the story without seeming disingenuous. And I'm not sure if, like the original, I see this particular movie finding its way into some of the acting Oscar nomination talks, but I could see potentially getting some nominations in a couple of the other categories that the first one was nominated for, chiefly cinematography and costume design. Let's start with the wardrobe. I thought the costumes were really quite exquisite and helped to create a nice feel for the overall world. I always admire it when period pieces are able to capture that look of the era through its dress, and do it well. And speaking of look, while it certainly is different than Lumet's film, Branagh's film had a great feel to it aesthetically. Branagh leaned on cinematographer Harris Zambuloukos, a man with whom he has done several films including Thor, Cinderella, Jack Ryan's Shadow Recruit, and Sleuth. Zambuloukos also has some experience shooting tension in tight quarters with his work on the 2013 Tom Hardy film Locke. He also won an American Film Institute Award for his cinematography work on 2007's Death-Defying Acts. That was a movie about Harry Houdini starring Guy Pearce and Catherine Zeta-Jones. Because of the current technology, Zambuloukos was able to use some really unique shots both inside and outside of the train that I thought really enhanced the story. Some interesting choices made during the shooting, including Kenneth Branagh deciding to have the film shot on 65mm and have it projected in 70mm in some theaters. According to IGN, the train that was built for the film also used more than 2,000 LED screens that were mounted to the outside of the train to play passing scenery while they were shooting, which is pretty cool. Overall, this is a fine film. There are certainly a number of things to admire, and I think that Branagh made some choices that were a refreshing addition to the story. However, there were some things that did detract for me, and I feel like the pace of the film did lag a bit at some times. I give the 2017 Murder on the Orient Express a 6.5, leaning toward a 7 out of 10. It's one that I think is fun to see in theaters, but not one that I feel like you should necessarily rush out to see. That said, if you have not seen the 1974 version and you do want to see this modern retelling, I highly recommend seeing the 2017 version first, because otherwise you're going to ruin the mystery of the film, you might not like it as much, and honestly I think if you do see this new one first, having had no experience with Murder on the Orient Express, you might actually like this newer version more than I necessarily did. And so, those are my thoughts on Murder on the Orient Express, the 2017 edition. When you've had a chance to see the movie, I want to hear what you thought about it, and especially if you have seen the 1974 version and then you saw this new movie, I want to hear what you thought comparing and contrasting the two, so leave your thoughts in the comment section below. That will do for this episode of Old, New, and Now Playing. Thank you so much for watching. As always, if you like this video, go ahead and click that like button and become a subscriber to the channel and check out all the movie reviews we have coming out in the future. Thank you as always for watching, and I will see you next time.